Prologue. Cyrus Blake stood atop one of the three towers, spires that climbed from Rorel-Batir, a maze of walls and bulwarks below to stab defiantly into the brooding sky. The clouds above promised rainfall and perhaps thunder, though that was not the storm that worried Cyrus. Far below him, beyond the outer ramparts of the Bastion of Roses, an army was amassing. Tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of Dark's soldiers, fanatics, cultists, and creatures were gathered on what had once been a great city. Now, little more than crumbling ruins remained. Some buildings still stood, true, but they were now defiled by the presence of the enemy. And everything else had been torn down, one brick at a time, or torched until only ash remained. It was desolation the likes of which this land had not known in 200 years. Even that hadn't been this bad, he thought grimly. He could still remember fleeing with the other children as the soldiers of Rorel-Batir stood one final time. His father had perished that day, and now Cyrus would soon join him. If only he'd be alone in dying today. His gaze shifted from his countless foes to his allies. His numbers were a cup of water against an ocean, a flood that was about to pour out upon them. But guardians were never broken easily. True, only 60 guardians were still present at the Bastion of Roses, with 200 soldiers ready to support. A meager force compared to the opposition. Cyrus would love to tell himself that he'd beaten worse odds, though it was a bitter lie. One last act of defiance, he thought instead. And that was precisely what it was. The Bastion of Roses would be little more than a hiccup to this army as it marched west to Gitralin. It was some small comfort that many of the soldiers under his guard had agreed to escort the civilians to safety. The 200 that remained were those who refused. Each of them knew the price. Their lives were forfeit the moment those outer gates had sealed. And they had chosen it against his direct orders. His own captains had looked him straight in the eyes and chuckled when he told them to go. Unless my memory is already gone, you're no longer a serving general with the Guardians of the Golden Realm. Lionel Drake, one of the best lieutenants Cyrus had ever known, replied. Which means I no longer take orders from you, my friend. I will not leave you here to die alone, as much as your pride may wish I would. All of the soldiers who remained had echoed similar sentiments, and as much as it frustrated Cyrus to see such good men throw their lives away, he had to admit that they would be of use to him yet. How long do you think we can fend them off? Mars, his second-in-command, asked. Cyrus looked toward the horizon, seeing mostly swarms of black all the way to the forest miles off. Any other fortress would fall within minutes, hours maybe, but the bastion was made by geniuses and protected by magic strong enough to confound most attacks. That, combined with the expertise of the soldiers under him, and the guardians that had volunteered to serve with him one last time? My forces and I will hold them off for 2 days, perhaps more, Cyrus said, reaching up and feeling the Artor, the rose engraved within the pommel. The first of its kind. After he fell, it would not be wielded in combat for centuries to come. A shame, considering how fine a weapon it was. You and your forces? Mars asked, arching one of his dark eyebrows. His eyes were like stones beneath them, contrasting his pale skin. The hair atop his head was the color of pitch, matching his demeanor. Despite his stormy temperament, Cyrus couldn't ask for a better companion. Nor did he trust anyone else for the task that awaited the man. You've served me faithfully for decades, my old friend, Cyrus said with a smile. Now, I have one last favor to ask you. My family lies in wait in the mountains, southwest of here. I want you to take them to safety. Even as he spoke, Cyrus couldn't keep his thoughts from Lilla and little Edward. They were the sparks of life that had pushed Cyrus to endure when even his own resolve had crumbled. He only hoped they would continue on once he fell. How would Lilla fare, raising their son on her own? She was strong and capable, true, but it would be a great challenge. Edward, though only 3, was already exhibiting the trademark Blake stubbornness, and his father couldn't be prouder for it. They're close to Gethrol, if they're in the mountains, only a 2 or 3 day ride from the Golden Realm's borders, Mars mused. It would take them longer if they had to wait for me to catch up. You won't take them to Gethrol, Cyrus said, never taking his eyes off the army before them. Was 2 days too optimistic? It wouldn't matter as long as Mars made it away clean. Even half a day should give him enough of a head start. You're going to take them to the nearest rift, somewhere south of the Palace of Light. I want you to join them, an outcast. The thought of sending his family there terrified him more than he would ever admit. A world without magic. The ancients who had separated the two had been out of their minds, but in their folly they had created a safe haven from even the most powerful magic wielders. A safe haven that his family would be forced to hide in for generations. That way, when the boy is born, he'll have time to acclimate before his powers drive him to the brink of madness. The only solace Cyrus had was that he knew it would be worth the price. "You want to banish your own best friend and family to Outcast?" Mars asked, obviously taken aback by the notion. "Perhaps you have lost your touch after all." "My mind is still sound, as is my reasoning," Cyrus said, pushing the memory of a young boy with golden, glowing eyes from his mind. Instead, he turned to his companion. "Mars, you will do this for me, won't you?" The man's gray eyes narrowed, a hint of anger flashing across his expression before he mastered the emotion. "You just don't want me to die alongside you," he said. In truth, that was part of why Cyrus had chosen the man. If he could save only one soldier from the fate that awaited those defending the bastion, it would be Mars. But he couldn't tell him that. "I don't trust anyone else with Lilla's safety. You'll care for your godchild in a way no one else can. Please, my friend." The Guardian mumbled a curse beneath his breath that Cyrus was clearly meant to hear before turning to face him. Mars nodded, removing the crushing weight from Cyrus's shoulders in the process. He had guessed that Mars would do this, but he hadn't been able to confirm. Though, the gamble was far from over. The commander still had to escape Rorel Batir without dying to the hordes beyond the walls. The undertunnels would help, though it was far from guaranteed success. But if he'd asked Mars any sooner, his friend likely would have tried some foolish tactic to get Cyrus to flee instead. It would have been just like his most loyal companion to set aside the fate of the world to keep his friend alive, and that would have carried disastrous consequences. "The battle will start at sundown, when Dark's forces are at their strongest. You should leave now if you're to have any chance of making a clean getaway," Cyrus said, turning fully to face Mars. The man did not look pleased, that was certain. "It's not just for your own good, my friend," Cyrus thought, though he didn't dare tell him that aloud either. It'd be centuries before this gambit might pay off, and Cyrus had to hedge his bets with the outcome, even if that meant keeping every person he cared about in the dark. Even Lilla didn't know the true meaning of this plan, and she never would. "You're a swindler and a coward, you know," Mars said, shaking his head even as he smiled. He held out his hand. "And you are a no-good fool," Cyrus said, clapping his hand into the man's palm. "Take good care of her for me, would you? She'll likely hate me for this, even if she knew it was coming." "I'll make sure she does, even if her anger will never mirror my own," Mars said, smiling one last time before wrapping an arm around Cyrus. They embraced for a moment, as each of them knew they would never see the other again. A bitter send-off, but it was the best either would get, considering the circumstances. "Goodbye, my friend." Mars turned and disappeared down the spiraling stairs, making the long trek back down to the heart of the fortress. Cyrus watched him go, then let his gaze linger on where he'd disappeared. They were one step closer to victory, even if no one from this generation would be alive to see it. At least Videl would be there to taste defeat, at the hands of a Blake no less. Cyrus glanced over his shoulder at the sword on his back. And at least this blade would be the vile man's undoing. Justice would be served, even if it was several centuries in the making.